Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful October day out there.
You know what? Today we're really lucky because actually, really on the podcast over the last month or so, we've had some great guests on Overdue Finds. Thinking back to our interview with Terry O'Reilly a month or so ago for his event, Customer Services Marketing, which, by the way, you can go back and listen to in our archives. And today we have another big interview lined up. And that, of course, is with our next Forward Thinking Speaker Series presenter, Michael Landsberg. His presentation is coming up on November 3rd, and it's called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me. So, Caroline, we talked off air, and of course, most people probably remember Michael as the host of Off the Record on TSN. So, yeah, I've obviously, it's a show that I watched religiously. And so I'm really excited about today's show.
This is definitely one we've been looking forward to for a long time, and being able to talk with these people, I just love doing it. It's great to have these conversations and have these little tastes of what the library presentations are going to be.
So, if you're not familiar, Michael Landsberg was the outspoken host of TSN's Off the Record. And for watching his show, you'd never guess that he had been battling mental illness and depression for most of his life. So, lifting the stigma from this topic, Michael Landsberg will share the story of his own battle with mental illness, as well as the unexplored stories of some of the world's most recognizable sports figures, to show us that recovery, strength, and hope are possible in some of our darkest times. And of course, this event is presented in partnership with our friends at the Edmonton Community Foundation. Obviously, this is an interesting topic that we're covering today with Michael Landsberg because, yeah, there is the sports side of it, but there's also the very personal side of mental illness. And obviously, Michael Landsberg has been very outspoken about his own personal battles, and he'll be sharing some of that stuff with us today.
I think there is something like, I don't think it's a coincidence that he coming from this sports world, it has meant so much for him to be opened up about his own battles with mental health, mental wellness, depression, anxiety. There are stigmas attached to different things, and when we did the interview with Chris Nowinski, talking about some of the things that people don't really want to talk about with sports culture, and I think mental health is a really important piece of that.
So, yeah, we really think you're going to enjoy today's interview. You're going to learn more about his talk with us on November 3rd, as well as some interesting behind the scenes details about Off the Record that you might not have heard before. So, without further ado, we present to you our interview with Michael Landsberg. All right. So, as we teased at the top of the show today, we're absolutely thrilled to be chatting with Michael Landsberg. He, of course, has his presentation with us coming up on November 3rd as part of our Forward Thinking Speaker Series. So, Michael, welcome to Overdue Finds. How's it going today?
Bryce, Caroline, it's going great. I'm looking forward to getting the chance to impact your audience, the people that sign up. It's hard to do this virtually, but if I was doing this face to face, I would make some kind of guarantee like, hey, if you don't think that there was value in hearing what I had to say about mental health, then I'll buy you. Like I have a speech in Windsor where I'm going to be there face to face. I said, I'll buy you coffee and a donut, which like it's not like I'm, throwing the bank at it, but that's how sure I am that this can be useful for people.
Nice. So, can you tell us a little bit more about your presentation with us called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me? I guess what can people expect to learn from your talk?
Well, I think people who have had mental health battles in their life will feel like they are understood. That's like what am I shooting for in this? I'm shooting for people to go, wow, it's like he was in my head, because I am of the belief that we all feel the same things when it comes to something like depression. They affect, our lives are affected differently because we all have different lives, but there's things that we all have in common. And it can be hugely empowering to hear someone talk about them and to react to that by saying, yeah, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was all alone in this battle, but now I find out actually someone understands me. And if he's probably not the only one to do so. So I'm trying to do that. And also I'm trying to show people who care about someone with a mental illness the same thing, but in the opposite direction, which is I want them to understand, if you haven't been through it, you can't understand that these are things like the loss of the ability to experience joy. No matter how hard you try, if you have not been through depression, you cannot understand it. So those are like two of my goals. And if you wanted to sit back and wait for 20 minutes, I would tell you the rest of my goals, because I mean, this is kind of, I won't say what I live for, but this is what I do.
Many people who recognize your name might know you from TSN. Did you always want to be a broadcaster?
Always, 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 always. But it wasn't until I found out that there was no other doors open for me that I was willing to take a chance to try to walk through that door. I came from a family that was pretty traditional from the standpoint of what people did for a living. My dad was an orthodontist. My brother became a doctor. I only had one uncle, and he was a chartered accountant. So, and all my friends, you know, had ideas about what they wanted to do. And they were all, I think, like professional schools. They were all doing postgraduate work in something that would give them immediately a job. Like no one says, how do I become a doctor? I mean, if you can't figure that out, then you're not getting into medical school. You go to medical school, when you graduate, you're a doctor. Not saying it's easy, but the route is pretty easy to chart out. But I wanted to do something that I had no idea how to do it. And I was afraid that I would be lost in this industry. So I avoided doing what I wanted to do until I found that all of those options were closed to me. I failed out of the University of Toronto after my third year, which was the best thing that could have happened to me, because that meant I had no safety net. I had no second choice. It was, okay, I'm going to do this. I've always wanted to do this. And while I was afraid before, I'm no longer afraid, because I'm not giving up anything. I'm not risking anything.
Did you have any broadcasting influences? So did you grow up, obviously, did you watch stuff like Hockey Night in Canada
Oh,
or
yeah.
anything else? Like, who were some of the influences on you that really made you want to get into broadcasting?
You know, I watched, of course, Hockey Night in Canada. And, you know, I think actually I used to watch Dave Hodge, and I used to listen to Dave Hodge on the radio as well. And I really liked his, I liked the fact that he always said something. I mean, you can talk about sports in particular without really saying much. You know, you could say, hey, the NHL preseason kicks off on Saturday night. The Maple Leafs take on the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers and the Leafs played, 8 times last year. And, you know, like, that's not saying something. That's not making use of your time. You're saying essentially the same thing that everyone would say if they hadn't really thought about it. So I learned from people and I admired people that made a statement, that said it their own way. And I kind of made a vow to myself when I started, which was, I will always, always, always say it my way. Sometimes that'll get me in trouble, and sometimes people won't like it. And sometimes if there's a joke in there, it will fall flat. But better to try to be different than just be all the same as everyone else.
You know, he's talk about being different. In 1997, Off the Record started on TSN. And how many shows did you do? It was had to have been in the thousands, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. 210 shows a year, 18 years. So we're
Wow.
talking about between 3,500 and 4,000 shows. And what a blessing that is. I don't mean like a religious blessing. I don't mean like, oh, you know, I'm thanking God for giving me a chance to do Off the Record. I mean, like, what a gift, you know, from an industry that doesn't hand out a lot of gifts. I said a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of people who could do the job I'm doing. They wouldn't do it the same way, but that's okay. But I'm the one that gets to do it. And I was always thankful for that, and never took it for granted, and never thought that that I was the only one that could do it.
So was Off the Record your brainchild then, or did somebody at TSN kind of come up with it and kind of think of
That's a
you?
funny question. Yeah, that's a funny question because there was a guy who back then was the vice president of programming. That person in that position typically makes decisions about what is broadcast, what is shown, and it was a guy named Keith Pelly who went on to be the president of the Toronto Argos. Then he ran the consortium of Bell and Rogers for the Olympics in 2010. And then he left to go to Rogers, and he was the guy that bid on the hockey rights, that massive deal that they got. And since then, he's run the European Golf Tour, which is an amazing job. And he was a real free thinker, really open to other things. So he knew that I was a guy that wanted a chance to do something different. I wanted a chance to be me. And I'd done a lot of the show Sports Desk, now Sports Center. And I always felt like I'm probably 40% me, 60% of just a product of the show and the mechanism and the need to deliver the news. So he said, I want to do a talk show. And I said, great. And he had an idea for this talk show, which I did not like, but was able to convince him, along with a guy named Bob Makowitz, who produced the first 10 years. We were able to convince him that there was a better way to do this talk show. So it was kind of a hybrid of what he started out with and what we, and not just the two of us, what others took, which was we wanted to be more about the social, moral, and political issues of sport than we wanted to be, should Zach Hyman play on the Oilers' second wing or first wing, first line. I think that's where the intrigue was, and that's why we captured an audience.
Mhm. Speaking of you being you, you've been very open about your own life with depression, and you've since started the online community Sick Not Weak. Could you tell us more about what that site is and what it does?
It's actually pretty simple. It's not like we're out raising funds to build a hospital, which is a great thing to do. It's not like we're out raising funds to try to find new treatments. Our goal really is, if I got the chance to talk to every Canadian, like I'm talking to the two of you, and to talk about mental health, and to talk like I'm going to talk on our talk on the 3rd of November. I'm just impressed I remembered the date.
That's pretty good.
If I got that chance, then I think I could show people that mental illness is a sickness, not a weakness. And if we could ever come to that conclusion, if people actually really bought into that, then the stigma would all but disappear, because the stigma is based on the perception that mental illness is different than physical illness, that depression is different than Parkinson's, that somehow it's self-inflicted, that somehow, yeah, I know it's bad, but come on, like if you just suck it up a little bit, then you'll feel better. If I could convince people of that, then I think we would live in a different world where people would go and get help who were afraid to come out and get help, where they would tell their boss. I think we would have a world where people didn't take their own lives for fear of actually being found out. Not to suggest for a second that we could solve the suicide problem, but there's some people who are just too ashamed to come out, and they'd rather die than share their illness. That's what Sick Not Weak is for. Sick Not Weak is to look people in the eyes and say, you know what? You're struggling, you're battling this thing, you're beating yourself up, you are telling yourself that this is your fault, that somehow you've let this happen to you. And I'm here to tell you, or ask you the question, do I seem weak? And the answer is no. I mean, given the way I'm talking, right? Well, if I don't seem weak, if you don't see my illness as a weakness for me, why is your illness a weakness for you? And if I could do that with everyone, then I could make a difference with not everyone, but with many.
The pandemic has been really hard on everyone, and it can be like, just as you just mentioned here, it can be really hard for people to talk about their own mental health. I guess, what type of advice would you give someone who might be struggling, or maybe even someone that knows of someone else that they suspect might be struggling with depression or anxiety?
Well, let's talk about this so there's two distinct halves to that question, or the answer has two distinct halves. On one hand, you have people that are really really worried about returning to work, really worried about their physical safety, really worried about how to act. Do you shake people's hands? Do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? And also, probably most of all, worried about re-socializing, worried about getting back into the groove of being part of the gang. I think a lot of people are feeling like it's a house party on a Saturday night. Now they're walking in and they're all insecure about people looking at them and whether they're going to fit in. So I think that is not mental illness. I would say, a mental issue. And as for how to deal with that, I would say that the biggest thing you can do is share that with someone else. Like if you get on a Zoom call with 10 people from work and one person says, anybody else here kind of like really uneasy about returning to work, and like we were all so close, and or we used to have such a good time. Anybody else here really worried about whether we'll find that again? I think that you would find that everyone feels that way to some extent. And then there's the issue of mental illness, which I think has been exacerbated for sure by the pandemic. How much, I doubt we'll ever know. But is there more people that probably could be diagnosed with a mental illness? Absolutely. Are there people that have mental illnesses like depression who have worse mental illnesses because of the pandemic? Absolutely as well. I think it's about looking at yourself and looking inside yourself and asking the question, do I need help? Because the gray area here is that all of us have a little depression from time to time. All of us have anxiety from time to time. Some depression and some anxiety is part of life, right? But there's a difference between the part of life depression and the illness depression. And I tell people, you got to look at yourself and say, right now, do the things that bring me joy or brought me joy 2 years ago, say, do they still bring me joy today? I'm talking about little things. I mean, for me, this is the marker of depression and mental illness in general, the loss of the ability to experience joy. And if you can say, oh, no, I'm worried a lot for sure about returning to work, but no. And, like when I go out and do something fun, or when I watch a show that I really like, or when I see my kids come home, like if you say you can still feel joy, then to me, you're above that line, which gets drawn, which is if you're below this line, you should go for help. You owe it to yourself.
And having access to the tools that can help you see that, like it can be hard to navigate some of those nuances in how you're feeling. So something like a scale of being able to rate where you're at on a daily basis is helpful for people to reflect on themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, we call it the Sifter Scale. And the Sifter Scale is a made up measurement which you can give yourself because no one else can do it for you. It's not like, most tests, the results are external, right? Like no, external is not the right word necessarily, but they're quantifiable, or you can take a picture of them through an X-ray or an MRI or a blood test or a biopsy. Like there's something that you can see that's definitive, right? Like no one has to say, well, I think your cholesterol is a little higher than that. It's like, no, there's a number. That's tough to do with mental health because everything is anecdotal. All we know is what someone says. And one of the challenges, you've never been in anyone else's brain. So sometimes it's really hard to know what's normal. So I kind of look at it this way. If 0 is the worst time imaginable in your life, not with the circumstances of your life, but since we're talking to someone in this context who's been through depression or anxiety before, if a 0 is the worst imaginable day where you're barely hanging on, or if that's a 1, and a 10 is full mental health, which is not necessarily I walk around giggling all the time. It's not euphoria. It's the ability to feel euphoric. So if 0 is the worst and 10 is perfectly normal, where are you now? And let's compare that to where you were 2 years ago. So I would say for me, the last time I was off medication, if you asked me where I would say I was probably a 1. That I couldn't imagine anything lower, but I would make it a 1 because who knew, you think you're at the bottom and then you find out, wow, there's something else. And today I would say that I'm probably a 6, but I would also tell you that I can't go above a 7 because of the meds that I'm on. They squeeze everything down into this range. And that's a decision that I've consciously made that I'm willing to accept. I'm accepting of giving up the top of the scale for getting rid of the bottom of the scale. And I think those numbers are really helpful. And I'll say to people, so what are you, Sifter Scale, today? And what were you a year ago? Like someone starts on medication and you say after 3 months, so how you doing? And they go, yeah, I'm doing okay. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. It's like, okay, what's your number? And people that I have this conversation with know what I mean when I say, what's your number? Probably 6.5. Oh, really? What were you 2 months ago before you went on meds? Probably a 3. Well, that's a wild success to me. So I think that having a way to quantify it is a really good thing. And by the way, I'm not here advocating for medication. I'm not like a believer that that's the only way that you should do it, and that we should all be on meds. Meds are lousy. Meds have they take a toll on you. I told you they don't allow me to feel the upper range. But like a lot of medications that can be life-saving or life-giving in this sense for me, you're willing to put up with some downside for the upside of the benefit of the drug.
Yeah, everybody has their own kind of healing journey, I guess, to go on in those aspects, and whether it's speaking with maybe a psychologist or going on medication or both, it's probably everybody has their own journey.
Right, and my goal is to do what the shirt that I'm not wearing it today, but sometimes I wear a shirt with a slogan on it to give talks, and it's "Fight for your happiness," and that may seem pretty general, but specifically when it comes to mental illness, you need to accept the fight, because there's usually no easy solutions. And when you say it's a fight, when you say I'm going to war with my illness, then you leave all weapons on the table. There's no playing by the rules. Whatever can make you better is at the very least worth giving a shot at. So a lot of people say, I don't believe in meds. And I say, well, that's stupid, not to believe in something that could be at least a partial answer to your problems. I'm not saying start with it, but I am saying leave everything on the table for this fight that for some people, gets dragged on for years because the things they try don't help them. But eventually most people find something that will help them and give them their life back.
Is there one thing that you hope people take away from your presentation?
I hope they take away, there's probably like
I was
50
going to
things.
say
I would say
on
one.
that, I felt bad with one.
Right. No, I'm good with this. But like everyone who answers questions, I'm not tied to your question. I can answer it. I can answer with more than one. What are you going to do? Cut me off? I would say the first thing would be a superficial thing. I really try hard to make it energetic and to make it fun. Which I think is lacking in mental health talk. And I think sometimes people don't pay attention to the message because it's just dull and corporate. And I'm not dull and I'm not corporate, and this is not sanitized. I can speak the language of a person with mental illness. And I think that's a really, really good way to connect with them, is to talk the way people talk, not the way corporations talk, but the way people talk. So I would look to make that connection with people. And I want people to walk away with a better understanding of just what this thing, mental illness, is. And if I can do that, maybe I can empower others to carry with them the strength, the attitude that I bring to it, which is, like if this was an AA meeting, I might start by saying, hey, my name is Michael Landsberg. I battle an illness called depression and anxiety. I'm on medication today and likely will be the rest of my life. I understand why people take their own lives. I have been taken down by this illness, a time that I will never get back in my life. But you know what? I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. And I'm not weak. And if you hear someone talking with strength like that, there's a natural reaction, which is, well, I was always worried that people would think I was a loser, but he doesn't sound like a loser. I may have watched him on television and thought that he was a jerk, but he doesn't sound like a loser, and he doesn't sound weak. I want to share my own strength of word when it comes to this. With others who may be empowered because of that to share with someone for the first time.
We've got a couple of fun kind of off the record type style questions to wrap things up here. And this is a question that I've been really looking forward to asking you. So, you've been involved in some really uncomfortable interviews on off the record, including some confrontational ones with people like Chael Sonnen and CM Punk. In your opinion, what was the most uncomfortable interview you've ever been involved in?
I think that there's a fine line between uncomfortable for the audience, or is it uncomfortable for you? Because it's possible that if you are uncomfortable, it could be highly entertaining, right? Highly entertaining. And that's what you want to do. And if you have to serve yourself up and sometimes appear either foolish or lose an argument, that's okay because it's entertaining. And that's what your job is to do. The two that you mentioned, the CM Punk one, I was not the least bit, I was not feeling awkward at all because I believed that I was in the right. I thought he was sensitive. I thought I asked him a legitimate question to start, which was, you're coming from professional wrestling, WWE, and you're going to UFC. And in UFC, it's a real fight. In WWE, it's theater, right? And that's not a criticism. That's just what it is. Have you ever taken a real punch to the face? And he said, what? And I said, well, in wrestling, you don't take a real punch. He goes, have you not seen any of my matches? And I said, yeah, I've seen your matches, but you're not punching each other in the face. You stomp your foot and you slap a guy in the chest. And again, I'm not disrespecting wrestling. That's just not what it is. And from there, it went downhill. And I thought, you know what? Too bad. That's a legit question. Then I asked him about, I said, you are suing the WWE. Because of he felt like they screwed up a medical issue with him. And I said to him, but your wife still works for the WWE. Is that uncomfortable for her to be working at the company that her husband is suing? And he got mad at that too. And I thought, I'm good with this, right? I don't care if he's mad at me. These are not unfair questions. Chael Sonnen was a little bit different, mostly because I didn't think I performed particularly well. Chael was not in a good mood, he told me afterwards. And I challenged him in kind of a mock sort of wrestling way, saying, hey, are you afraid of Anderson Silva? And he went, what? Because I'd been told, challenge him, throw it out there, and you're going to have a great time with him. But he took it seriously, and I didn't have the amount of research in my head that I needed to be able to come back and really scrap with him. I've scrapped with. To keep it in UFC, I've scrapped with Dana White. I've talked about his world. On what I thought was pretty even playing terms with my interpretation of his words. So I'm arguing about UFC with a guy who is UFC. And that you could only do if you're prepared. But I didn't think I was really well prepared for Chael Sonnen. And so I would say it was awkward for sure. And for me, not my best.
Yeah, just regarding the CM Punk one, I just recently rewatched that interview, and yeah, it was like, you're right. As a viewer, I was kind of uncomfortable, but it was almost kind of like watching The Office type uncomfortable. Like,
totally,
yeah, I'm kind of squirming in my seat, and I'm just like, with us doing the podcast here, we haven't really had too many uncomfortable interviews at all, actually. But yeah, I just can't imagine sitting across from somebody like that, and you can clearly tell the other person just does not want to be there at all.
Yeah, it's really easy when you feel like, hey, I'm good with what I asked. If he's pissed off at me, then I'm okay with that, right? Because if I had asked him something and then as, our brains work quickly, we can evaluate things. If I was thinking, that probably wasn't a fair question and now it's really awkward, I would feel bad about that, right? Mm-hmm. But tough is not the same as unfair. The things I enjoy the most in doing an interview is being able to challenge someone, especially if they're strong enough and they enjoy a good scrap. And they're the best interviews, the most fun I've had is with people that I think are smarter than me, because then I can challenge them as best I can. But if someone's not comfortable, you just look like a bully. So Sometimes, like, how does it? You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and sometimes to do a good interview show, you got to make some enemies. And as long as you feel like you're in the right, then go for it.
Mhm.
Was there anyone that you really wanted to interview or have on as a guest on Off the Record or other projects you've been involved in that you never had a chance to talk to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure. I would say, like I could have at all times, because we would tend to get people not necessarily at the peak of their career. We would get almost anyone who played the game, who's retired from the game, we could get, because they all of a sudden now, instead of going, I do not want to do another interview, or I do not want to say something that's going to get me in trouble with my teammates. When you retire and you've been out for a couple of years, now you're going, is everyone forgetting about me? I kind of like the spotlight. And therefore, you can get almost anyone at that point. But we never got like the biggest stars in sports when they were playing. So I'm sure that there were a whole bunch of people that I thought, wow, I'd really like to get that person right now. The best guests that we had were guests that we got who had been retired for a while, like NFL, Michael Irvin, NBA, Sean Payton. I mean, these are guys that are, like we're Hall of Famers, right? And you could get so much out of them that you couldn't have got when they were playing.
And finally, because we're a library podcast, we have to ask you, do you have a recent maybe book or movie, maybe video game even, that you can recommend to our listeners to check out?
I am a World War II buff.
Hmm.
So everything that I've read, everything that I watch is, I mean, I don't mean I don't watch other television, right? But when it comes to, okay, this is just me, I'm not watching with anyone else, on my iPad at 11 o'clock at night, I'm watching documentaries for the most part about World War II. It's kind of my hobby, and the more you know, the more you want to know. And the same thing with books. I've read tons of fictionalized stories about World War II, but I think what I really like is the nonfiction that's written in first person, where you can really get a sense reading a book that you could never get by watching a film or watching a documentary. So World War II, anything. And if anyone's got a recommendation, give it to me. But don't give me like some of the obvious ones, like The War by Ken Burns is a documentary series. Ken Burns was a guest on Off the Record, actually, and I watched him a couple of days ago. I guess he has a documentary series on, I'm trying to remember, is it Muhammad Ali? And I was thinking The War by Ken Burns is one of the best things that I've ever seen or read. And he actually was on the show just before my daughter's bat mitzvah. And I did a video for her with different guests answering questions about her. And he was on her video, which I don't think had much of an impact on 13-year-old boys and girls at that point. But The War by Ken Burns, check it out. It's on Netflix.
Nice. I just recently watched the Vietnam War one from Ken Burns. It was really well done. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have. He's, I mean, the amount of research that goes into that is so phenomenal. And the writing is always so phenomenal. The War in particular, I like because of the subject matter. And I love the title because, as they make reference, I think in the first episode, people didn't call it anything other than the war, because everyone was involved. Everyone knew about it, and there was nothing else really that was going on in the world that mattered. It was just the war. He's back from the war. So that's my hobby, and check it out.
We will. And so thank you so much for chatting with us today. It was a huge pleasure getting to chat with you as somebody who watched Off the Record so many times. It was a great honor getting to chat with you today.
Well, honored to be honored, and a great honor to be on November the 3rd, to be sitting probably in this chair in my kitchen, looking into this camera on my laptop, talking about the most important thing that I've ever spoken about, which is obviously mental health and the idea that, hey, I'm sick, but I'm not what? Finish that thought. I'm sick,
Weak.
but I'm not
Weak.
Oh God, if you didn't get it, I would go, oh my God, have I not had any impact on these people at all? So you passed the test.
Good. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Caroline, that was a fantastic interview. And like I said, it was a huge, I mean, for myself anyway, as somebody who grew up and still does watch TSN, and in particular watched a lot of Off the Record, especially in my college days, that it was a huge honor getting to chat with Michael Landsberg today. And I think, I was excited to see his talk before, but I'm even more interested in seeing it now.
He's such an engaging speaker, and I think that part of what resonates with him as the person is that he's being honest, he's being genuine, he made a reference at one point to being able to speak the language, and that's what he's doing by putting his story out there, and takes a lot of courage, a lot of bravery, and a lot of strength to do that. I mean, it's clear that he is not weak, and that comes through with talking with him, or seeing him talk, like you will in the presentation that he gives.
Mm-hmm. We were very lucky at the end there. We were paying attention when he asked us. It's like, sick, not, and then like it was like quiz time. Made sure we were on our toes and didn't miss that weak part. But we'll have a link to it in today's show notes. But if you get a chance, please go and check out the website, Sick Not Weak. And we talk obviously we talked in this interview about kind of the scale and how you're feeling and everything. So when you go to the website, you can enter in how you're feeling that day. And myself personally, I went to the site a couple times just in prep for this episode. And to be honest with you, Caroline, I had two totally different answers both times I went to the site, on how I was personally feeling. So there's lots of great resources. He has a blog on there too, and we can't recommend you to go check out that site enough.
I sounded like at one point, Bryce, did you admit that the quick roundtable questions were inspired by Off the Record?
A little bit. Like, it's kind of funny because, like, as somebody who watched a lot of the show, that's pretty much what Off the Record was really like a whole half hour of quick roundtable questions. And I mean, his was, more structured, obviously, and not to say ours isn't, but ours is kind of like here's a random snippet. But at the end of the episodes, he would kind of do this thing where it's kind of like give one answer and move on to the next question. So definitely inspired by Off the Record for sure.
Oh, I like that. A little bit of our own Overdue Finds mythology.
That's right. So just a reminder that tickets are currently on sale for Michael Landsberg's presentation on November 3rd called Darkness and Hope, Depression, Sports, and Me. And they're only $10 each and can be purchased online at epl.ca/speaker series. And the event, of course, is presented in partnership with our friends at the Edmonton Community Foundation. So Caroline, I know you're looking forward to this one just like I am, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's something our CEO, Pilar Martinez, said at the beginning of the Terry O'Reilly event. You can't beat the parking with these live streamed events.
So true.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure that you're subscribed to the show so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and of course, we'd love to hear from our listeners. So if there's a certain topic that you would like us to cover in a future episode, you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca or email us at podcast@epl.ca. And don't forget that you can share your thoughts on the show with us by using the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.